Hi everyone and welcome to the seminar My Heart Leaps Up, exploring the themes of childhood and imagination through literature and social sciences. This will be partly based on texts and activities you can find in the book The Human Side, Literary Pathways Through Social Sciences Topics by Ilaria Piccioli, published by Editrice San Marco. Well, let's get started. So first of all, let me stress the importance of social studies. Why are social studies so important? Well, because through the studying of society, students may develop into participating citizens. So this studying society will equip students with problem-solving skills, which they will later use also in their life to address social, economic, and ethical issues. And so social studies will enhance civic competences. And this leads us to consider global citizenship as a very relevant part of the students' learning. As language teachers, I think we are all aware of the fact that we are much more than just teachers of a language. There's a collateral learning to any language teaching that we cannot ignore. And we know that bringing real-world issues to the classroom, it's also a way to develop students' language competencies. And this can be done, for example, by focusing on topics of sustainable development, like the 17 goals of the 2030 Agenda. And this is something that we also do today. Talking about learning skills, there are 4 C's, I'm sure you're familiar with, that are so-called 4 C's of the 21st century skills. Well, these are considered essential for students to succeed in school and in the workplace, as well as in life, I would say. Well, these 4 C's let students create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. What do they stand for? First C refers to critical thinking, then we've got creativity, collaboration, and communication. We'll go through each of them in a bit more in detail, but I would stress the fact that as facilitators of learning, teachers should try and promote learner agency as much as possible. That is, empower students' creativity and control over their own learning. Start to consider the first C, which is critical thinking. We could consider different aspects which have to do with critical thinking skills. As you can see here in the figure, if we start from analyzing a problem or a topic, an issue, and then we generally tend to reason over it and evaluate it in order to develop problem-solving skills and be active participants in a decision-making process. I would stress the connection between critical thinking and social studies. I think this link is very, very relevant, as social studies really provide students with critical thinking skills that are crucial for understanding the world, and not only the world, and at the same time also the literary text they will explore. Let's consider the second C, creativity. Okay, what does it refer to? Well, creativity is the practice of thinking outside the box. This means that students should be able to look at a problem from multiple perspectives, including creative ones. So they may develop more innovative or creative solutions to a problem. And they could also present information or their perspectives, their points of view in a creative way. And I think that today there are lots of tools, and devices, and which can really make students' work creative, even in the way they present it. And here I just want to give you some suggestions. You're probably already familiar with most of them. For example, they can present what they have learned, creating a screencast presentation using PowerPoint or Adobe Spark, or they can make a video and share with the teachers and with the other students using Flipgrid, which is an app which is super easy to use, or they can create another visual product or multimedia product using the Canva website. Okay, let's look at collaboration, the third C, which I consider is, again, really, really important. Well, first of all, collaboration is the practice of working together to achieve a common goal. And practicing collaboration and teamwork will help students understand how to address a problem and also decide the best course of action. As we all know, educational research has found that through peer instruction, it's generally much easier for students, for example, to address misunderstandings. And generally speaking, educational experiences that are active, that are engaging, that are student-owned, generally lead to deeper learning. As Lev Vygotsky said, what a child can do in cooperation today, he can do alone tomorrow, and we should never forget that. Let's consider now the fourth and last C, which is communication. Well, in a language lesson, and this is really essential, I would say. So what is communication? Well, it's the practice of conveying ideas quickly and clearly in an effective way. And this is even more important in a virtual environment, as the one that we have been using for quite a long time. So, besides discussing text in small groups and debating topics, for example, students could also create sound files expressing their viewpoints or commenting on news, commenting on text that they have read, and they can do this using a recorder called Vocaro, which is a very, very useful and easy to use tool. So here is the website address if you want to try it with your students. So what does literature have to do with social studies? Well, literature-based approaches to teaching social studies are effective in promoting citizenship learning. And literary text provides social studies students with a better understanding of how the world works. So these two fields are very much linked, very much connected. Besides, literature nurtures imagination, and literary texts, they promote understanding, they promote and develop analytical skills in students, and they're generally particularly engaging to students because they allow them to develop their interpersonal skills. And imagination is also linked with critical thinking, with creativity and decision-making skills, so with the four C's that we have just seen. Well, this is a way to introduce literature while developing critical thinking at the same time. This is taken from the book The Human Side. This is kind of introductory part to the studying of literature. So some quotes about reading books are provided by by famous authors or famous artists, and students are asked to reflect on them first of all, and explain them if you want in their own words, and then also, and this is the more creative part, to add a quote of their own. So they are asked to reflect on what reading literary text means for them, which role it plays in their life, and then also to add a quote of their own. So if they should express in a very short sentence, in a slogan, in a few words, what literary text and what reading in particular means for them, what would they write? What do they say? So this is a way also to foster their creativity. Okay, now I'd like to show you a bit more in detail the literary paths. This is taken from the section 4 of the book, which is devoted to the Romantic Age. As I told you before, the theme of this seminar is about imagination and childhood, and we know that how important these aspects were during the Romantic Age. Okay, each section opens with a flipped classroom activity. So video is provided, which illustrates what the main social, historical, social, cultural aspects of the age considered. In this case, the period is the period of the Romantic Age. So the topics dealt with in the video will have to do with the industrialization, industrial development of England, and all the big changes related to it, as far as society and economy and also technology were concerned, and also the political expansion of Britain, which became a big empire, as we know. Some key concepts are pre-taught, are introduced as a sort of vocabulary brainstorming, teaching activity. So this will help students to understand the video in a more effective way. And this will be assigned as a homework generally, and the students will be then required to do some activities like video comprehension activities, or some expansion activities after watching the video. And then everything will be discussed in class. As you know, the flipped classroom activity is an active teaching strategy which generally increases the students' motivation, and at the same time promotes some practical based learning. Okay, here you can see the some of the activities provided. So this is multiple. These are notes that are based on the video, and so that they could be also used to recap the main points. And what the students are supposed to do is to choose the correct alternative for each sentence. Well, here is another activity, which is a mind map the students are supposed to complete with missing information. So this is about the key ideas, key concepts, all relating to the period, the phenomenon of Industrial Revolution. And this activity is part of the so-called inclusive strategy, inclusive learning strategy. Okay, another activity here. This is a fill in the gap, so with the words provided. And this text focuses a bit more detailed, as it focuses on the working conditions during the Industrial Revolution. So again, notice the social aspects, the social nature of the text choice. And finally, we got a chart with the key events, and where students have to briefly describe what type of event is linked to that particular year, so what happened and why this is relevant for what they are studying. And this is the end of this introductory part to the section. Okay, now so we are going through towards getting closer to literary text. At this point, students are ready to deal with literary text, but we as the teachers should try and to trigger what the text is about. So again, we should try some pedagogical approaches which will help the students' approach to literary texts. And I think that any scaffolding strategies is useful in this stage. For example, we can try to anticipate what a text is about through a brainstorm techniques, and this could also be done through scaffolding techniques, any type of scaffolding techniques really. What I suggest you is a word clouds that a teacher can create. So, and this is something that also students could try and make maybe after they have read and dealt with a text. So this is used as a pre-teaching technique, but this can also be used by students after they have become familiar with a text. I used for to create this example, this sample word cloud, this website, which is edward.net, which is very useful and easy to use. Okay. Now, I think at this point students are ready to read the text, or the text of the texts. I will suggest you will propose here more than one text. I would start with a poem by Blake, since the theme of our seminar is childhood, as we have seen in imagination. I think this is a good starting point. This is a poem by Blake, The Little Boy Lost, which introduces the topic of childhood and also the complex relationship between child and father in the setting, in the historical setting that we have hinted at in the introductory phase, which is the period of the Industrial Revolution. So after reading the text, students obviously are required to do some comprehension activities, some more classical text analysis, and here you can use questions, you can use charts as here, as exemplified here. You can use different, obviously different text analysis types and strategies, the ones that you prefer. And here is another poem by another author, by William Wordsworth, My Heart Leaps Up. I chose as a title one line in the poem, The child is father of the man. I think this line illustrates Wordsworth's attitude toward childhood and the lessons that we learn during that time. And I will use this as a guide, a sort of thread, and we will follow this even in the text that I will propose later. So Wordsworth dedicated many of his poems to reflecting on this period, this stage of human life, childhood, and to the lessons that we can learn from nature, from the environment. Here is also a painting, a picture, and one of the activities that will be proposed is to describe paintings. You can see it here. Okay, besides a more classical traditional language use activity where students are required to fill in a short summary with missing words, there's also an activity which has to do a bit more with communication, and which is based on a painting by a romantic painter, Caspar Friedrich, and students are asked to describe what they see in the painting. So again, this can be done in the classroom. They could also, as I said before, record if they want their description, and then exchange them or share them for example, in the classroom, virtual classroom, if you want. And here is another very famous poem by Wordsworth, which again has to do with nature and with imagination. So this is from Lyrical Ballads, as you all know, and I think we cannot ignore such a text if we are going to deal with nature and imagination in the Romantic age. And there are some text comprehension and text analysis activities that can be done in class or individual by students at home. And then I would suggest something a bit more creative. I'm going back to the sea of creativity that we mentioned before. Well, students could be asked in this case to create an itinerary in Wordsworth's footsteps. This is an sample itinerary taken from Visit Britain website, where for each day, each day is dedicated to a particular location in Lake District where Wordsworth used to spend part of his life and also to write most of his poems. And as you can see, for each day, a title taken from a line from some of Wordsworth's poems is chosen. So, for example, the first day, "The loveliest spot that man hath ever found," which is taken from a poem by Wordsworth. And then, so students can create something of their own, and this could be a model that they can follow. And then I would also suggest that they can add maybe a map with showing, highlighting the places of their itinerary, using, for example, a trip line. This is was done using a trip line. Again, I don't know if you're familiar with. This is an application, a map making application, which is quite easy to use. You can also add photos as well when you have completed your map. And again, this is a creative activity. So planning is a creative process, and thanks to these maps, students can visualize, can create a framework, even for a story to tell. These maps should not necessarily be real. I mean, they could also be fictional maps that they can use as framework maybe for their stories if they want to plan a more or less real trip. Okay, so this is an idea. Okay, let's, at this point, I will reconnect to the historical context. And here there's a kind of a double phase to the historical context. A phase which has to do with the past, so then, and the other phase, the other side, which has to do with the present time, so now. And the Threads of Life, as you can see, is the title which has been chosen for this part of the text. Well, thread hints at, the word thread, hints at a train of thought, something that connects ideas and events over the centuries in this case. And these events also are always the result of some human activity. So I think it's also important to focus on the experiences of people, and also people who could be inspiring for students. So could also be inspiring today for students. And for example, in this case, as you can see, I propose this figure of Robert Owen, famous social and educational reformer of the period, And then so students read about this important man and what he did. And then they are also invited to think critically about the core principles of his philosophy for social reforms, and also to do something a bit more creative and gather information about New Lanark, the village that was a kind of social experiment that he promoted. And then plan a full day visit for a group of high school students. So again, they can make use of also of tools and all the tools that I showed to you before, like for example if they want trip line or maps or whatever, they need to make their itinerary as attractive and as captivating as possible. Again, just another example of inclusive learning, inclusive teaching activity. Again, a mind map. This is about child labor in the 19th century. Okay, let's follow the threads of life, and they will bring us to present day society, so to contemporary age, to the contemporary age. And child labor is something which is still present in today's world, unfortunately. And so the students will read about this phenomenon, and also will be invited to think critically about it. And again, we'll consider some inspiring figures, this time of the present. In this case, this is about a teenager, a girl, more or less the same age as our students, presumably, and who became famous because she fought for the rights of children. So she's from India, from a village where child labor was, and child marriages also were very, very common. And so, and this is an example which can really engage students in the lesson, in the daily, in the classroom activity. Okay, now the last and final part is dedicated to social sciences. So the second part also of the book is devoted to social sciences, and the idea is to get more social involved. So through literature, students can now focus on some social issues. Since we have dealt with childhood and with imagination, at this point we could focus on children's rights, and in particular the right to education. This could also obviously be linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, so the citizenship, the part of the curriculum which has to do with citizenship. And this Rights Lab, which starts, it's the initial part of every topic, a social topic, introduces some, human basic rights. And in this case, since we are dealing with childhood, some children's rights, such as the right to education. So again, text comprehension activities follow, and vocabulary consolidation and strengthening follow each, as you can see here. Okay, so and also critical thinking is always foregrounded. Okay, and now here we are. This is the end of our seminar, and this has to do with pedagogy. I would like just to end with a note on pedagogy and why pedagogy matters. By pedagogy we refer to the dynamic relationship between learning, teaching, and culture. And I think it's important to stress that pedagogy cannot be separated from the social and resource context in which it exists. I think that at this point, both students and teachers can find inspirations in some effective pedagogical models and approaches that can equip the students of today with the knowledge and the skills that they need to learn, to work, and to live in the 21st century, such as critical thinking, such as problem solving, communication, and collaboration. We have seen, as in Wordsworth work, Wordsworth poem, for example, nature takes over the role of the teacher. And I would like to end with this quote by Wordsworth. I think we should never forget that the goal of the teacher in the classroom should be the same as the one that Wordsworth assigned to nature, that is, to spark the passions that build up our human soul. Thank you very much.